Hi Guavabees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the sandbox or on the website and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca and with me is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is, Dear Guava Bean, how can I set proper boundaries in an internship opportunity? I'm a freelance copywriter. I understand that there's time difference, but it seems as though my mentor takes a fairly long time to answer messages and a few times doesn't at all. It creates a lot of anxiety for me. Also, I need to find an appropriate way to say when I get overloaded with fully paid client work. I am accepting low pay in exchange for the experience to add to my portfolio. Should I cross the bridge when I get there, or just tell them from the beginning? I feel like there's a lot of it's like a 3-in-1 question, this one. It's really interesting to think about this person's mindset. What are your initial thoughts on this, Claire? Because I feel like this is probably a case of, setting boundaries with a client, but not just in terms of like communication, but also like workload as well, which is definitely a bit daunting for a new freelancer.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's like a 3-in-1. It's definitely a few things put together. It's the question about setting boundaries, and then finding an appropriate way to say that you get overloaded. So that's like another boundary. And then, talking about like, should I cross the bridge when I get to that? Should I tell these people up front? There's definitely a lot going on with this question. I think we should unpack it like one by one. But I think the boundaries, that question is a very good question. It's a very common issue that I think a lot of, especially new freelancers, have when you're just getting started. There's a lot of questions about like how to set healthy boundaries, to not get overworked or overloaded, but to also, get the support and the communication that you need. Have you had this issue yourself, like with the boundaries?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's maybe something that affects people who are new to freelancing and maybe haven't had to manage their own like workload. This can definitely be a problem when you're working with clients who are in a different time zone. My first client was based 8 hours behind me. They were on the West Coast in the US and I'm in the UK. And so I would be kind of ending my workday when they were just like starting. And this didn't matter because I was doing like a support role for the UK. So it was like UK hours. So it didn't affect my job. But when they wanted to communicate with me, it did make it hard. I think that my advice, if I want to call it that, because it's kind of difficult when everyone's scenario is different, but I think it is just to be upfront with a client and just tell them that your availability is a certain time and try and stick to that. Because I think maybe if you're coming from a place where your boss, or your employer traditionally would expect you to be available during a certain time, and then you're actually a freelancer, so you manage your own time, it's up to you when you're available and all this kind of stuff. It's difficult. It's like quite a difficult transition, but I do feel like you need to set those boundaries as early as possible, and it is hard. Like that's something I struggled with for a few years, because you almost feel a sense of guilt when you're not around when your client wants you to be, because you feel like, am I a bad freelancer? Like, is it my fault that I'm not around when they are? And I don't think that that's the case, but I do think you need to be honest with them so they know what to expect, so they understand that you're not just like deliberately avoiding them, and that they understand that your time zone is different. You may be spending your free time when they're at their desk. You may even be in bed, but you need to just like tell them and be honest, I think. What about you, Claire? Because I know obviously your clients have been in different time zones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always managed this, but I feel like communication is the key to solving any problem, whether it's with clients or just with anyone in general. If you have clear communication, if you set boundaries and expectations at the beginning, then you set yourself up for success later on. But if you don't have that conversation, if you don't make it very clear what's expected, then you run into issues like this where, she's saying that her mentor is taking a long time to answer back. Clearly, they haven't had a conversation about how long they should expect the communication to come back. So it seems to me like there's just a lack of communication here. It seems like, you know, this person is not getting the communication that they want, and it creates a little bit of anxiety for them. Obviously, this is something that they can control on their end. If you manage, you can manage your own expectations. If you know that this is a person who is often responding late or sometimes doesn't respond at all, you don't have to get anxious when this type of thing happens. But if it's a problem, like if it's causing anxiety for you, then it's definitely an issue. Anxiety is a symptom of stress, and stress is not good in any situation. So in times like this, I feel like just getting on the phone, like having a conversation and just saying like, hey, I really, appreciate and value this relationship, and I want to make sure that it goes well. What can I do to make things better for you? And, here's a couple things that I think you could do to make this better. Just having that kind of exchange, setting those clear boundaries. People can't read your mind. This person might not even know that you're feeling this way. So you have to communicate clearly how you feel and what you would like to get out of the relationship, or what you would like to get in return. If you don't have that communication, then you can't blame anybody for, not understanding or not living up to their end of the deal, because you didn't make that deal clear. So I would just say like the best thing you can do to avoid this situation is just to be as clear as possible in your communication, in your expectations. It's always easy to say that in hindsight, but now that we've done this a lot, and whenever anybody has a lot of experience, then you learn the importance of having that really good communication.
I agree 100%. I feel like a lot of the anxiety from this kind of situation is based on a lot of assumptions. So we assume that the client is not going to be happy with the fact that we're working in a different time zone, or we assume that they're late in replying because they don't like the working relationship, or there's lots of things that arise from, like you say, not having a conversation about it. And it does just pay to be honest. There's no need for this anxiety. I also think as well, like that anxiety and that worry to try and please a client comes from maybe a bit of low confidence in terms of your freelancing career, and that's understandable. I think everyone starts out from a place of not really understanding what to expect, and it does come from practice. You've already said that yourself, Claire, and I think as you learn to kind of stand your ground and say, I'm available between this hour and this hour, kind of making sure the client understands that makes you happier in your working relationship, but it also makes you happier in terms of what to expect from future relationships as well. Because the last thing you want is to say, I'm going to be available whenever the client wants me, and then it's like totally unrealistic for the rest of your lifestyle as well. I think that that's something you'll just have to figure out yourself, but it's important to remember that while it's okay to have a bit of flexibility in terms of kind of meeting a client's needs, and because that's mutual, because the client will do that as well, you don't want to completely like just be at the client's beck and call whenever they want and neglect actually what you need from your own career and your own schedule as well. So yeah, I think it does come down to just balance and having a conversation, like you said. I feel like that kind of moves us on to the second part of this, which would be the anxiety about worrying about being overloaded with client work. And I know this person has actually mentioned that they're in the very early stages of securing clients. And my first thoughts, although this is kind of connected, this anxiety of like maybe lack of communication, like you've mentioned, I also feel like this is quite a common trap that for new freelancers get into, where you're worrying way in advance about stuff that hasn't even happened yet. And I think we all do it, but in my eyes, it's important to remember that you have to take like one step at a time. And like you said, always be clear on communication. When you build a relationship with a client, it's always best to be honest. Don't just say yes to everything. Don't just say what you think the client wants to hear, because that is just setting yourself up for failure and unhappiness when working with the client. And, it's probably going to cause a bit of tension between you both if the expectations are very different to the reality of actually working together. So again, I feel like this is something that I have personally struggled with, and I think it's a lot of new freelancers do, when you feel like you don't want to turn work down because it's a client, it's work, it's money, it's experience. And then you regret it because you're just way too overloaded. It did take me a long time to learn how to say no, and I think that's something that a lot of freelancers have trouble with. Is this something you've ever experienced, Claire? Have you ever had that feeling of being kind of overloaded with work because you simply can't turn it down?
Oh, a million times. A million times. And sometimes it's not because I can't turn it down. Sometimes clients just overload me in general. And even when I'm working on a fixed rate or something, months just get busy, or you have busy weeks. Or sometimes I just work with clients that don't have maybe like a realistic view of what can be accomplished in the time. And so they just send me a list of everything, and they're like, just get done what you can. And I'm like, this is a ton of work. So I definitely relate to, finding an appropriate way to say no, or to say I'm a little too overloaded. It's very hard for us to do, because we work so hard to get these jobs and to get these clients that it feels so counterproductive to say no to work, that it goes against the grain. And I think so many people don't say no when they should, because they just want the opportunity, they want the money. And it's something that I've had to work on, and I've learned how to say no. I've learned when to say no, all of that stuff, and it's made me a better freelancer. It's given me the opportunity to work with the people that I really want to work with. And so, as hard as it is, I think it's very important to find a way to say no that feels gentle and, not abrasive to the client. I wonder, do you have a way that you say no? Like, is there a way or some type of phrasing or wording that you give to clients when you feel overwhelmed or overworked?
If I'm honest with you, I think it does come down to what we always say, and it's just like being honest and just communicating with clients. Like, every client I work with now they're people I genuinely like and I enjoy working with. So I'm not scared to have a conversation. If I feel like there's something that I'm not comfortable doing, or I'm not available and the work is just simply swamping me and I don't have time, I will just be honest, because I just don't see any other point in like lying about it or like wording it in a different way that isn't the truth, if that makes sense. It's quite a bit of a simple answer, really. Like, I don't have any like specific phrase or like magic word that I would say. It's just like, because for me, I think it is just that relationship is so important to me. And when I work with clients, I like to work with them for a long time. So I'm not scared to have a conversation, but I will have a conversation. If I'm not happy, I will just, the way I look at it is, what's worse, having that conversation which may feel a little uncomfortable, potentially, because you don't want to let someone down, or just keeping quiet and being totally bogged down and not able to perform at my best, not able to actually complete the work I need to do. And I think the second one's much worse. I don't want to let people down, and I don't want to provide work which isn't my best. So I will always try and be honest and upfront for that reason, I think. What about you, Claire?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what worked or what works for me. I know I've tried a million different ways to like tell clients, or like to limit the scope of work, or to try to control or manage my time better to get more things done. Um, I think for me, what works best as a way to say when I get fully overloaded, or, when I need to push back on projects, I just refer back to my priorities. Like, what's the most important thing that needs to get done? And then I say to the client, like, look, I have this many hours in a day, and these are my top 3 priorities. If, you would like to readjust any of these priorities, move one of things away to make space for this new task that you're giving me, then, I'd be happy to do that. But just showing them very clearly, like, these are my priorities. Something is going to have to change if you want this extra work done, because I'm not going to just add in more hours to my day. So that was one way to make them see, like, okay, I'm actually doing work. I actually have a lot. And usually when they see that, they're like, oh, no, those are more important. Like, you do those first. This is just like a little thing. So all of a sudden, the thing that they really wanted me to do a few minutes ago, when I show them my priorities, they're like, oh, it's okay, just do it later. Or, all of a sudden, it puts it in perspective for them what I'm actually working on and what's a priority versus something else. But in this particular situation, it sounds more like she's worried that she's going to get overloaded and then she won't have enough time for everyone, and she's going to have to tell them, that I can't work with you, or I'm going to have to cut back on my time with you. And she's worried, like, should I tell them that from the beginning, or should I wait until I get too busy and have too many clients and then tell them that?
I personally think when you put it like that, it worries me, because I think, like, if it was me, I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes. And I'm just trying to think, if I was arranging to work with a client and help them on a project, I don't think I would be that inclined to be like, but I might not be available later on, because then it sort of like shows a bit of a reluctance to work together. I would much rather agree on terms that you're both happy with, because that's what contracts are for and things like that. You're setting the expectations up, what's going to be expected of yourself, what the client expects from you. And then as the scope of a project changes, or your availability changes, or whatever happens, then is the point to have the conversation. I wouldn't want to necessarily, because obviously it's something we all worry about, what if the situation changes and I won't be available? But it doesn't make sense to worry about something that hasn't happened yet, I don't think. I wouldn't want to worry or put doubt in the client's mind right from the off. Like, if something is going to change, like if it's something major that means you're only available to work on that project, that's different, I think. But if you're just worried because suddenly you're going to be inundated with loads of clients and loads of work, and then you're worried that you're not going to be free, well, I think that just comes from learning how to manage your time as a freelancer. I think that's something we all have to do. And that shouldn't necessarily be resting on the client's shoulders. That's something you have to manage yourself. So yeah, so to summarize, I would say that I wouldn't worry the client with that straight away, unless it's something that's majorly going to affect your availability, and that you know of, and that will severely change the way that you work together. If it's just simply you're worried about the scope of a project changing and maybe not being available later down the line, then yeah, cross that bridge when it comes to it, and make sure you always have a contract and set out expectations from the beginning, because then you can have that conversation. It makes it a lot easier and saves a lot of awkwardness.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I would also say cross that bridge when you get there, because like you said, you're worrying about something that hasn't even happened yet. And obviously, we hope it happens. We hope that we're so busy with clients that we have to turn down work. But until you get to that stage, there's no point putting yourself through that yet. And there's especially no point, like you said, worrying the client or putting that in the client's head, because maybe they're considering between several freelancers. And, if you come off the bat and say, I don't have a lot of availability, I might not be able to work with you very long, I might get very busy soon and have to stop our work together in the future, that's a big red flag for them. They don't want to invest a lot of time and resources into someone who is only like 50% in. So even if you think you might not have a lot of availability in the future, unless it's a current problem, like unless you currently don't have a lot of availability, then I wouldn't say, I definitely wouldn't put that out there to the client, because they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear someone say to them, I might not be available to work with you.
Yeah, because sorry. No, I was just agreeing with you, and I was just saying I don't think it's a client's problem. It's a freelancer problem, and that's something that you will learn to do and deal with when you kind of develop your skills, I think, as a freelancer.
Yeah, exactly. Cross that bridge when you get to it, because if you don't even have like a busy client list, yet there's nothing to worry about. Like, you should just be grateful for the opportunities that you do have. You should put 100% of your energy into providing as much value and as good service as possible. And, just do that. Just focus on the present, focus on your work at hand, and doing the best job that you can with the people that you have and the opportunities that you have. And then trust that when the time comes, you'll know what to do, or you'll have people around you who can give you advice on what to do next. But there's no point worrying. And I think that's the biggest thing I see in this question. There's a lot of uncertainty. Like, there's a lot of worrying and questioning, and a lot of that is very normal when you're just starting out. It's normal to have a lot of these fears and worries, but I would say the best thing that you can do is just be really focused on doing the best work that you can at the present moment. Don't worry about what's going to happen 2 months or 2 years from now. Just try to do your best to communicate clearly, to set clear expectations at the very beginning. And if anything doesn't feel right, if you feel like you're not getting what you need from the client, or that you feel overwhelmed and you start to feel overloaded, just communicate. Communicate clearly in an email or on a call. I feel like 80% of all problems can be resolved by clear communication.
And I always feel as well like people are worried about saying something to a client in case it upsets them, or in case it changes their opinion of them. But as long as you're always honest about it and upfront, and not just honest and upfront, but you're able to provide like a solution or some suggestions on how you can go forward and make yourself happy, and obviously the client happy, and still help them achieve whatever they need to achieve. I think that those worries often never materialize. They're always worst case scenario worries about, I'm scared to say anything because I think my client, might pick another freelancer, or they might drop me, or, again, I think a lot of these worries just come out of fear of maybe, like you said, lack of communication, not really sure what the client's going to say. If you're just honest about it and positive and keep a positive mindset, I think you can get through anything, even the toughest situations with a client you can get through as long as you communicate with each other. But obviously I do recognize that when you are in a different time zone like this person is, and a lot of freelancers, we often are working with people around the world. That's the beauty of the career. It can be a bit difficult to communicate. You're not always going to be around for a phone call or something like that, which is why I always suggest something like Slack, because email can be a little bit, it's kind of difficult to hold a conversation, whereas something like Slack is amazing because it doesn't matter where you are, you can have a text conversation, and that kind of thing. I just think makes it a lot easier. These tools are there for a reason, and I think they make being a freelancer a lot easier in terms of communication.
Yeah, 100%. You should, I would definitely recommend looking into what way the client likes to communicate, or the mentor. You might assume that they like these emails, but it could be that the reason they're taking a long time to answer back is that they don't like email, and they do better with a voice memo, or they do better with a quick phone call, or with a Slack message. Oftentimes, we look at other people's behavior and we judge it without thinking about how we are responsible, or how we affect that behavior too. And so just look at your messages and ask yourself, is this the best way to communicate? Is this the best for my mentor? And maybe ask the mentor, is there a better way that you like to receive messages? I noticed that it's been taking you quite a long time to get back to me. How can I make this easier for you? Do you prefer Slack? Do you prefer voice memos? Do you prefer we have a quick 15-minute call once a week? How can I make this easier for you? And if you make it easier for your mentor to give you answers, then you'll get the answers that you need much faster. And sometimes it's even just in the communication. Some people send me these massive long emails, or a ton of questions. And even if I want to help them, I just look at that list of questions and my brain just says no. No, I don't have time for this. Or, it's just overwhelming. And I think people sometimes don't take into consideration how they ask the question makes a big impact on if you're going to get that answer back or how long that answer is going to take to come back to you.
Absolutely. And I also like how you touched on like voice memos and stuff, because I used to have this client and she was so inundated with things that I would just sometimes just send her like a message, like a voice recording. Because sometimes we just couldn't schedule a call in. Like, we're both so busy, our schedules clashed and stuff. But sending a voice memo just saved her having to read through everything, like you say. Like, it just saved like this paragraph of text that's just going to get buried under 50 other emails, and makes it easier. And also, another thing as well, which you reminded me of, is Loom, which I love, because if you want to try and show, like, I think actually it might have been you that showed me, Claire, ages and ages ago, but Loom is awesome because if you want to show someone something, it's just easier to just do that. You can just screen share. It's like a browser extension and you can just like screen share, you can talk over it, you can have a webcam in the corner, and it's just like, it saves trying to explain yourself if you can just show someone, and then you just get like a little shareable link and you can send it to them and they can watch it, and makes life a lot easier.
Yeah, that is a great point. Loom videos, I think, are like the new thing in terms of communication. I love them too. I send them to my clients. My clients send them to me all the time. It's a game changer. So I'll put the link in the notes for this podcast, but Loom is a free tool that you can use to record screen share videos and send your videos to clients. And that's one way to communicate that works for them. And also with voice memo, one of my favorite clients, her favorite way of communicating is voice memos. And so I downloaded a different app. You can use WhatsApp, you can use Line if you're in Asia, even Facebook Messenger. You can send little voice messages to each other. And that saves a whole bunch of typing things out or, having to get on a phone call to ask a few questions. We send voice messages to each other, and it's her favorite way of communicating. And so I think you have to meet the client halfway, and whatever is easiest for them is what you should use if it's really important to you. If it's important to you to stick to email, then stick to email. But if it's important for you to get answers quickly, then make it easy as possible for the client.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about the anxiety around maybe not receiving the answers you need to complete a project or something. If it's literally just a tiny change in the way that you communicate and it saves a bunch of anxiety and like uncertainty, it's definitely worth doing. We hope you enjoyed listening to the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and follow Guava Bean on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for updates and new episodes. As always, our goal is to empower you with the information, inspiration, and direction you need to achieve financial freedom through online work. For more content like this, join us in the Guava Bean Freelancer Toolbox. Just go to guavabean.com to start your free trial now. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. See you in the next episode.